Hi. I've been asked by Madeline Casano to answer a few questions about the Gay Liberation Front, which was an organization that I belonged to starting about 1969 when it formed. I suppose I kind of disappeared from the scene sometime about 71. GLF ceased to exist somewhere around that time. After that, it split up into a lot of other groups, special interest groups that went on to become, well, to do an awful lot of other things. So, just to give you a little bit of an idea of how it started, it's all well documented, actually. You know, this book here, Tales of the Lavender Menace, by Carla J. It's for the details. You can read that book. But basically, there was a riot. Well, there was a raid. There was a police raid on a gay bar in Greenwich Village in 69 in the summer. And it was called Stonewall in time. At the time, it was June 27th, 1969. And, you know, people will talk about Stonewall being the pivotal thing that sparked this big... Well, actually, it was the last straw, that's all. And it happened at just the right time. Stonewall, that type of thing, happened all the time in the gay community in New York City. There were a lot of gay bars. There was a lot of money made and this money was made by the mafia, who took a payoff, the police, who took a payoff, and most likely some of the state liquor authorities, who also got their rake off. People who ran the bars had to pay all those people off, and in return they got protection, and protection meant that they could run the bar any way they wanted to. So some of these places were pretty badly run places. You had to pay a lot to get in at the door, and then you'd get watered down drinks, and they weren't safe. You could be treated just anyway. The capacity, let's say, would be 100 people at the door, and they may stuff 200 people in that night at a time. A lot of money was made. There were dozens of gay bars in the West Village in the 60s and the 70s. Just dozens. They came and went, and some were old standbys. And one night there was a raid. Why the raid happened, you know. But some of the people who were being hauled off were sufficiently drunk and angry and had nothing to lose, and they started to fight back. That was a little unusual. Usually gay people went placidly, or they didn't bother to try to fight back. They knew it would happen. They'd get not only arrested, but they'd get wrapped around, you know, they'd get hurt. So, but it became, you know, the next day there was a little bit of a news story in the Daily News, and some pictures. But by now, there were a lot of gay activists around, but they weren't specifically gay activists. They were activists who worked in other people's liberation struggles. There were a number of individuals that belonged to gay rights, small gay rights groups up in the universities, Columbia, NYU, little struggling little clubs, really. And there were activists that belonged to the Communist Party who'd been booted out as soon as it was found out that they were gay. And it occurred to, as a matter of fact, the names of these individuals. There were somebody named Charles Pitts, somebody named Bill Kassenberg, somebody named Pete Wilson. I think Charles Pitts, I believe, worked for WBAI and in programming, And these people had a lot of experience in kind of working for other people's rights, and they felt like it was about time they worked for their own rights. They placed an ad in a newspaper that was coming out on the, a little rag called the East Village Other. Then there was Rat, and was another rag. It would get placed around on the Lower East Side. The Village Voice wouldn't take the ad. They felt that the word gay was obscene, and referring to homosexuals was obscene, and we didn't want to have anything to do with it. So I saw, and a lot of other people who showed up at that first meeting, and the meeting was called for Alternate U, at Alternate U, which was on 14th Street and 6th Avenue in Manhattan, right around the corner, as a matter of fact, from this notorious woman's gay bar that I frequented all the time. And I don't think that these people who placed that ad had any idea what was going to happen. Hundreds, I think, of people must have shown up. All kinds of disaffected gay people who had it with this scene where we were completely in the hands for our social life, for our socialization of these corrupt entities, the mafia, the police. At least this is from my point of view. This is the way I saw it. And that all this money, the gay community obviously had a lot of money. People spent money to meet each other. And all the money did not get put back into our community. It got put into the pockets of these corrupt individuals. And personally, at that point, I was 18. I wasn't living at home anymore. I had my own little place on the Lower East Side. And I knew an awful lot about the mafia because my mother had been living with a guy who ran a bar in the mafia. I knew how things happened and what it was all about. And quiet. Anyway, for me personally, it was a particularly gay life at that point was, it could be very violent. It's just, even in the best of days. I mean, I was having a very hard time at work. I had been outed at work, and I had a little job as a cashier. And I'd been outed, and I kind of was pretty much the weirdo. And at school, I was a student at the Cooper Union, and I was the only gay student, and I was really having a hard time there. I was called Donna the Dyke by the professors, so, this was kind of and I wasn't at all pushy. You wouldn't, by today's standards, I wasn't a problem. But just my existence was enough. And the fact that I resented the restrictions being put on the women at school by some of the professors. Women weren't allowed to use, for instance, the power tools. And this was an edict that came from a particular you were supposed to ask the boys to use the power tools in sculpture class. Women weren't allowed to touch them. I told, a girl came up to me, a woman came up to me and said, "Oh, don't touch the power tools, Donna, you didn't hear about it, but we're not allowed to use them." And I just said, "Well, don't tell anybody you told me, and I'm going to use them. And when you see me use them, why don't you join in and use them too, and we'll put a stop to this." Well, that didn't happen. The women just, these straight women just went along with, you know, and the upshot was the professor said, "Well, Donna, the dyke can use them, and all you women can ask Donna." Actually, he said, "All you girls can ask Donna to cut your materials, your metal and your wood for your sculptures." So I wasn't really very happy at school, and I had a full scholarship, but it was a kind of a trial. I had an out-and-out fight with that particular professor after a while, so it was pretty grim. I saw this ad in the Rat newspaper, and I went. I had some gay roommates in my little apartment that I'd met in the bars. I went to the bars all the time. I wanted a community. I wanted to have fun. I was a kid, you know. I wanted to dance and talk to different people all the time, and to date and to run around, and all the activities that a normal teenager would have. I really wanted it. And I couldn't. Yeah, there were exceptions, you know, gay kids who could fit in to a straight environment and were the exception, and everybody loved them anyway. Well, I wasn't one of them. I just felt a gap. I felt a need. So when I went to GLF, I was happy. It was chaotic. It was crazy. It was this mob of screaming gay people, every type, flamboyance queens, cerebral type, intellectual type men and women, and fabulous women, fabulous women. They were all older, more or less. There were a few young people, and I never even saw them because there were so few very young people. It kind of appealed to 20-something, people who'd gotten through, you know, who had at least gotten their BAs, or at least were older and had a lot of experience in organizing, and that's just what they did. Within a couple of weeks, alternate U couldn't handle it. Would be the GLF meetings were called for every Sunday night, and alternate U couldn't handle the crowds. How many people showed up, I can't really tell you. It was just a room full. Sometimes there was no room when you were at the end of to get in. People came and went. There was no order to anything. It was a free-for-all. At least that's the way it looked to me in the beginning. And then they managed to get, and by then, after a few weeks, there was a core group that formed. And initially those 4 core groups, and there's a lot more people who were really, really worked hard, but the names that most come to mind for me are Martha Shelley, Susan Silverman, Ellen Brody, Linda Rhodes, Ellen Shumsky, Susan DeVere, Lois Hart, Carla J, Michaela Griffo, Mae Brown was around, and many, many other people, and those are just the women. That doesn't count Jim Ferret and Bob Kohler, and just wonderful people. And all screaming and yelling at each other and not thinking each other was, I mean, that's the way it was. GLF was a hot mess, you know, but it was democratic. Anyway, they got a bigger space at the Church of the Holy Apostles on 8th Avenue near 28th Street. And from there, for the next 2 years, we reacted to things for a change. If there was a raid, if someone got hurt, we organized a demonstration, and we picketed. We picketed outside Time magazine, picketed outside the Village Voice, complaining about why they wouldn't accept our ads for our meetings. What was this? This was the Village Voice. Is this supposed to be a bohemian, liberal newspaper? And they're afraid to say the word gay. And they changed. The Village Voice changed. And then they were able to carry our ads for our meetings. There was a lot of small groups. We started to break up into smaller groups, interest groups, which would settle around a task. And it was introduced, a lot of the women came from Red Stockings, and now the gay women who were really not, didn't feel welcome at Red Stockings, and came over to GLF, and they lent to GLF and to Red, and to their tools, the tools that they had learned at in these groups. And one of those tools was consciousness raising groups, and we started to break up into consciousness raising groups. The women felt that they needed their own contingent, in a sense, and we would break up into small consciousness raising groups and meet at each other's homes. I joined one, and in my group, for instance, was Barbara Love, Sydney Abbott. Lois Hart was in my group for a while. And we just discuss stuff. We would discuss anything that was coming up. It got more and more political. Sometimes it was just very personal. People would cry. People would talk about their lives, and it really helped. It really helped you, and you could talk to other people in a way that the only other person, you have to remember that you could talk to as a gay person at that time was a psychiatrist. If you were upset about something, it wasn't the kind of thing you went home to your family about. Gay people were very isolated. You could talk to each other, but it's not enough. It was one more avenue of being able to work out your problems and listen. You too, you've had that happen as well. Well, what do you do about it? That type of thing. Was really great. Another highlight, if I go down the questions, I am supposed to. So as I said, it formed in 1969 around July. And it happened because these fellas put these ads in, and a lot of people showed up. How we got more people, what was how did we mobilize? How did we acquire membership? Ads. We put these ads in. Word of mouth. Leaflets. Posters. Some of our members, like Jim Farrat and other people, had been had a lot of communications skills, and they knew how to get the attention, so you'd get a write-up in the paper and demand a write-up in the paper. We were no longer trying to, if there was a raid, we didn't try to hush it up the way gay people ordinarily would have. We brought it to the attention of the authorities because we wanted to bring to the attention what had actually happened, why it had happened, and where the money was going. And to me, that was the most important thing, is where the money was going, because it was all about money. As I say, gay bars the gay population of New York City had a lot of money. You know, if you think that your average on a Saturday night, the only place you have to go to meet another gay person is a bar, and you're going to be forced when you get in there to spend anything from $20 to $50. Men tend to have more money. They spent more. We women didn't have a lot of money. I might go out and only spend $5, but that was a hard way to go. You were always ducking around. It was a lot of money. We were playing with fire because the mafia and the police who were taking on the take were going to take a big hit. Anyway, the overall vibe is very positive and, you know, very contentious. People fought all the time. But the attitude that was different was, we're not ashamed anymore, and we're tired of being afraid. And look at us. Look at around this room. Look at how many people are here. Look at how many people are mad. Maybe we can do something with this energy, with this anger, with this feeling of wanting to fight back. And that's basically where, which hadn't really happened at DOB and the Mattachine. They were wonderful organizations, but they were more fearful in tenor, and we didn't want to be fearful anymore. We didn't want to be afraid. We wanted to fight. You have to remember that at that time everybody was fighting. We were kind of taking our cues from the Black Liberation Movement and other peoples of color that were in struggle, and we're saying, why can't we do the same thing? Why can't we give a right as well for our rights and for our right to exist? So, the thing that most, well, in July of 1970, I guess I was just turning 20, or less, not quite, it was 19, was the first gay parade, and quite frankly, there weren't that many people in that parade. There were about 150 of us. Different members have different numbers, but I remember it was pretty sparse and scary. And I had a sign that said, I am your worst nightmare, I am your best fantasy, or something to that effect. And we marched from Greenwich Village and up to Central Park. Mistake. We should have marched down towards our strength. But there were only 150 of us. It was the first parade. We were scared to death. I don't care what anybody says. Yes, we marched out there proudly, trying to look as brave as we could, but we were really scared. I mean, gay people got beat up all the time coming out of bars. Gay people got roughed up all the time. You really didn't have any rights. So to be right out there in the middle of the day, marching, having it plastered all over you, you were kind of inviting to, you know, a lot of violence. But we wanted to say we weren't afraid anymore. We were going to fight. And we wanted the people in the streets who were gay, who were hiding out there, to join us, to say, hey, look, they're fighting. If we get in there, we can fight too. And that was the first gay parade. It was actually quite a frightening experience. And later on, everybody in GLF met up in the sheep meadow. Not everybody actually marched up, you know. I guess we were on 6th Avenue. We weren't allowed on 5th Avenue. Not everybody marched, but everybody went up to the sheep meadow. And there's a photographer, Diana Davies, who took some wonderful photographs that you can see in the New York City Public Library archives. She became ill, and she donated all her art, all her work, all her negatives, all what prints she had to the library before she basically lost her home. And they're incredible. They really tell a story. One other, and GLF organized demonstrations. We were a pain in the ass, is basically what we were. Trying to call attention to our situation and basically to try to build our ranks. We didn't really expect too many straight people to like us any better than they ever had. But what we were trying to do was to get gay people to realize that they could fight back if there were enough numbers, and there was numbers, and that there was money involved, and that if gay people got together and refused to give our money to the mafia and the police and plowed that money back into our own communities, into our own gay centers, for instance, youth centers, all kinds of those kind of dreams. Those were the kind of ideas that got bantered around. Oh, wouldn't it be wonderful if there was a youth center, if there was some place for these kids to go, for runaway kids to go to discuss things, you know, to how much grief and how many suicides would be prevented, all kinds of things that are in existence now, at least in New York City, but were not in existence then. And there was one particular action that we staged, happened in March. On March 8th, 1970, there was a raid on a bar in the West Village, a men's bar, and a fella named Diego Vinales. And this particular action is particularly meaningful to me. He was an illegal immigrant, and when the bar was raided and he was hauled in to be booked, he became so frightened at being sent home that he threw himself off the steps of the West Village police station and impaled himself on the picket fence that surrounded the station, and giving himself a critical injury. That very night, GLF staged a demonstration in front of the West Village police station. And I was at that demonstration, and we were chanting, down with Salieri, down with Salieri, who was the police chief of the West Village police station. Down with Captain Salieri. Well, the very next week, and I happened to, my mother, as I say, was living with a mafia guy, and he ran a bar on the West Village, not a gay bar, and he was here, and then he had a boss that was here, and he used to throw these big dinners on a Sunday where a lot of the muscle men from the mafia would have dinner And it was very nice, actually. It was good for my mother. We'd been very poor, and when she met this man, he kind of took the family, the rest of the kids and my mother, out of the tenements and installed them in a nice apartment. And then they actually started to live together, and he was nice to her. He wasn't mean. He treated her well. And he treated my brothers and sisters fairly well, and I moved out. I had never lived with a man. We'd never lived really with my father, so I'd never had to put up with a male presence in the house, so it wasn't about to start. And I was 17, so I had moved out, got my own place. But on a Sunday, I would show up and get this free food, really. And so one Sunday I was there, and there was this big dinner, and down at the end of the table, sitting next to Rocky, who was Joe, my mother's boyfriend's boss, was this very handsome man in the place of honor, sitting next to what I knew to be a mafia boss. And I asked my mother out of curiosity, who is it? It's a new face. He was well dressed in a beautiful suit. He had the pinky ring. I figured him to be a new face on the scene, you know. And she said, oh, she was so proud. She said, that's Captain Salieri, the captain of the West Village Police Station. And he's here because I'm going to fix him up with my friend, Beverly, who used to work at the Playboy Club, and she needs a new boyfriend. Well, I guess my jaw must have dropped. My mouth dropped. I mean, he was the corruption that GLF was fighting against right in my mother's dining room. It couldn't be more blatant. What was the chief of the West Village Police Station doing, having supper with a mafia boss and all his contingent, and being fixed up with a lady friend of my mother's? It was amazing that they had the nerve in the middle, right out in the open, to consort together. And that's how corrupt the New York City police were, especially in the West Village, with the mafia. They were obviously Goombas. And I guess my mother saw the look on my face. I said, Mommy, that's not right. He's a police, and he's the mafia, and she just, when she saw the look on my face, she realized that, you know, I was going to blow it. She dragged me right into one of the bedrooms, and she said, don't you say anything. Don't you say anything. You could get us hurt, Donna. You could get us hurt. Do you want us to get hurt? And I mean, she knew nothing about GLF or any of that stuff. What she meant was, don't go out there and get in that guy's face and make a scene. And I said, of course not, Mommy. No, it's okay. But she didn't trust me. And she said, and you're going to go home now. I love you. Here's a lot of food. She put all this food in a bag. And she says, go home to your friends. It's okay. See you later. You know, like, get me out of there, because she knew that these guys were pretty dangerous. She'd lived with the mafia, I mean, most of her life, but she also knew the deal, what the deal was. You didn't go against them. Well, I went home to my lover, Arlene Kisner, and I told her, I said, my God, you know, it's unbelievable. And she says, Don, we know all this. Don't worry about it. She says, we know. Everybody in GLF knows. Everybody in the city of New York knows. The corruption goes way up, she said. That's what we're fighting against. Eventually, he did get busted. That police captain, the Knapp Commission came in, and that was the end of that. He got busted. But after that, what we did to break that hold, that economic hold that the mafia and the police had over us, to free up that money, is we started to throw our own dances, our own social events for gay people as an alternative to the bars. And our first woman's dance was, well, it's around the same time, you know. It's 1970, and we threw it. We sold the beer by donation. It took a lot of work, and that's what activism is all about. There's a lot of work involved, a lot of little jobs. I mean, I was only 19. I wasn't somebody who could write a big position paper and had to set the seminal ideas. Those people were like Lois Hart and Martha Shelley and brilliant, brilliant thinkers and brilliant writers who could just put into words what we were feeling. I made posters. I printed the posters at the Cooper Union print room. I stenciled the Lavender Menace t-shirts. So everybody could do it. Somebody else, and I don't even remember her name, another young girl, she dyed or at least she delivered them. On 6th Street, those people dyed them. And I got them, and they had to be stenciled with the words on them. Everybody did a little bit of that shit work, is what we called it. And then people had to go and buy the beer and haul it up to the dance actually got thrown at Alternate U. Then we had the poster, and we had to put ads in. The posters were pulled down by the mafia. And Cookie's Bar, which is right around the corner, they in particular were going to be impacted by our dance. They pulled them down, we put them back up. It was quite a scene. And we threw our dance. We did it by donation, $1 a beer, I believe, and it was an incredible success, way beyond what we thought. All we had was, I guess, a turntable. Records, I guess, and cassettes, something, you know, something to make music, and it really was. 1 million women, it seemed, showed up. And it hurt that mafia bar around the corner because we went and looked. We took a little walk around the corner and saw that it wasn't crowded the way it usually would be on a Saturday night. We hurt her business. We hurt it bad. Later on, she sent around a couple of thugs to kind of intimidate us. And that didn't happen. We didn't get intimidated. They said they were police and flashed a badge. Michaela Griffo told us, there were about 20 of us cleaning up. This was after the dance. Told us, well, if we're going to be arrested, just sit down. We're tired. Take us. You don't have anything on us. We didn't do anything wrong. We didn't break any laws. We didn't sell beer. No, you can't. You can't say we sold beer without a license, because it was by donation. Besides which, there's no money here. The money had been secretly taken away. And the guys were really taken aback. They did not expect that kind of reaction. They really expected us to be frightened. They were big guys. They had bulges under their jackets. I knew they weren't mafia because their suits were too cheap. I figured them to be either cops, detectives, or state liquor authority. State Liquor Authority were the people who gave liquor licenses, and they could legitimately be called to burn us if we had been selling beer, but we weren't. We were just like a church. We were doing it by donation. And they did not expect this defiance, this relaxed defiance. Yeah, go ahead. We're sitting down. Go get a big paddy wagon. We're ready for you. Take us away. Do it now because we're really tired. And so they did their little act like, well, we're going to let you go this time, because they just didn't know what to do. They were leaving. And Michaela, as they turned to go, Michaela said, "Say hello to Cookie for us." And one of them turned around, and I swear, it was a look of fear on his face, like, how do they know? How do they know she sent us? Because I'm sure that's just exactly what happened. We hurt her business so badly that night that she called up. She couldn't make her payment. She knew she wasn't going to make her payment. And she said, "You've got these queers around the corner selling beer. How can I make my payment if you're letting my competition sell beer right around the corner? Take my customers away." So they came expecting to terrify us, and that's not what happened. And as he turned away and they kept going down the stairs, and then Michaela made it worse by saying, "And next time bring your sisters." Can you imagine? We were rolling, we were laughing. And instead of being terrified, we were hysterical, laughing. It was fabulous. It was the most fabulous. We were fighting back. Finally. And we were hitting them where it mattered, in the pocketbook. And that money that was made off the dance was put back into GLF and put back into activities like we would go on speaking engagements to different universities and to different groups that began to ask for us. There would be a women's group. There was a women's group in New Haven that they wanted somebody to speak from the from Gay Women's GLF. I got sent. I was 19. Myself and a woman named Marquita. I don't even remember her last name. We went together, and we were a hit. It was in a church basement, and we spoke to all these straight ladies, and we got through somehow. No script, nothing, but we got through. But that kind of thing, buying the tickets to get up there. Then we went up to Cornell, did the same thing, gave a talk up at Cornell on how to start their own contingent, how to start their own homophile or, resistance group right there on campus, or at least help with that. They already had one, but, they wanted to share tools, basically. Those kind of activities had to be funded. The money to buy the tickets, the money to get there, the money to eat on when you got there, and that's basically what GLF was doing. We went to the women went to the Black Panthers convention in Philadelphia, where we actually were very welcome. We thought we would be, but we weren't. I suppose it just was too soon to ask the black community to deal with what we were trying to say, but we went, and there we met other women from other cities, other gay women from other cities, in particular Joan Byron from Washington, D.C., who wanted to start the same kind of things going on down in Washington, D.C. And by going and mixing this way, different cities, Boston and Chicago, and we were starting to exchange ideas by putting out our own newspaper. That took money. The Come Out came, and it had to be printed, it had to be distributed, it had to be, so all takes some money. All done on a shoestring, and all done on money that we raised ourselves with our dances and selling the posters. I took some photographs that became posters that got sold. Other people did other things like that. One little, they call it a zap, one action that got a lot of attention was that we showed up at the now second Congress to Unite Women, and basically took it over. Rita Mae Brown and Arlene and Lois and Suzanne and a bunch of us, others, there's a lot of people, Pat Maxwell, Martha. That's when we used the t-shirts that said Lavender Menace. As I say, we all contributed in the production of those t-shirts, and then we put them on, and we basically raided their meeting. They, up till then, now did not want to recognize gay women as they didn't even want to say the word lesbian. And Rita Mae Brown and other people who were in, Michaela Griffo and Carla J. objected to that and wanted to complain, basically. So we went and Michaela snuck behind the stage and turned off the lights, and then we took over the stage and we stated our case that lesbians had done an awful lot now, and they had been not even allowed to say what they were. They had to lie. They had to go to Now and make up husbands and boyfriends, and just like everywhere else. And here they were, the backbone of these organizations. And enough was enough, really. And that was a pretty well organized, and the timing had to be right, and the secrecy involved it had to be perfect as well. One of the questions that Madeline has here is, what would my advice be to young queer bodies, she calls them? You guys have all kinds of new designations. to refer to each other nowadays. And, well, you know, in GLF, whatever skills were needed, you'd be amazed at the simple skills that, you know, in those days, it was before, it was pre-digital. So all communications, leaflets, all of that, it all had to be print. So those of us who had some art skills, and I've been to art school, I've been to the School of Art and Design, I was in Cooper Union, could bring those skills to GLF. Paste ups and mechanicals is the way we put out things. And then, you know, you basically, if we were silk screening posters, photography, you know, a great number of us were photographers, fledgling photographers, and we took a lot of pictures. It was very important to us to show each other what we looked like, to not be ashamed of what we looked like. Joan Byron spent her whole career doing that, and she traveled all over the country and talking about gay pride and how women were getting together, and this is what you look like, and you look great, you know, you're beautiful, not the way they want you to be, you know. There are many of you. Other people, you know, I put my mind to learning how to use a multilith machine when I went down to Washington, D.C. It was quite a monstrosity. Nancy Myron, I have a photograph of Nancy Myron here also operating a multilith machine. That's the way we would print up our leaflets. That's how we would print up our notifications to each other. Nowadays, you have digital, so that's what you would contribute. Share your tools, share your learning with other people in your group so that everybody is up to speed on the latest technology. It's real important. When you lose one, you need to replace it with another. And you need backup. Don't keep your skills to yourself. Especially in this digital age, I think actually it's a little more dangerous because it's all in those satellites, and that's one thing I don't think we have access to. That's one thing we don't control. The young people today who are in a position to figure out how that happens, that's where the power and the real strength is going to be, and that's where they can do us the most harm. They shut down those digital skills. I mean, I'm surrounded by, I love them. I love computers. I love the digital age. I was into wet photography, and that's what I did for 21 years, but I welcomed the digital age, even though it put me out of business commercially. I still think it's a great improvement. First of all, it's better for the environment, but on top of that, however, today it is actually more dangerous times in the sense that the tools that we're using to communicate with each other are much more sophisticated, at least to my mind. And if they fall into the hands of the wrong people, which can easily happen, we're going to have no way of communicating with each other unless some of you young people know how to get it back, know how to put up your own satellites, whatever, however it gets done. That's your challenge now, is maintaining what little, you know, people. I marched in the parade as one of the first marchers, and I will tell you that it was the most moving, just about the most moving experience of my life. was having these thousands and thousands of people say thank you. I was floored. I didn't expect that in my whole life. I never expected. I had always considered myself in GLF as a soldier in a war that was never acknowledged, you know. Sort of like, you know, the Korean conflict was always called the Korean conflict, and men who were in the Korean War for a long time, it wasn't recognized. Men in the merchant seamen during World War II, who served in the merchant seamen's industry, were never given benefits from the Veterans Administration until recently, until in the last 20 years or so. Even though they were just, they delivered the oil to Europe to fight World War II. So they were just as vulnerable. They lost as many lives. And I'd always felt that in GLF and in our early gay struggles that we were soldiers that never got acknowledged. Lost a lot of friends. You know the AIDS epidemic. It's just not AIDS. There's a lot of women that gay women just didn't do well. You know, it was going to be a grim life way back then. And most of my, I'd say 50% of my friends who were working class kids without advantages at all, who did not go to college, and that were not political, they're dead. So, I don't know why I even talk about that. But when I was in the parade and there was all this thank you stuff, I said, wow, this is a ticker tape parade for us. You know, I was with Mark Siegel, and we were marching together. There was just a few of us. Most GLF members are not really strong enough to march anymore. This long parade, incredible parade nowadays. I never thought that would happen. It was wonderful. It was really moving and heartening to experience. It was heartbreaking as well. This is my gay brother and my natural brother who became a trans woman, and my gay sister, my younger sister, couldn't march with me. Couldn't ever march. They're dead. And many other of my friends couldn't be there to see where we've come. But don't be fooled. This is New York City. This is the East Coast. This is, you know, the most, as far as I know, the most liberal area in the United States. There's a tremendous amount of work, and there's a tremendous amount of danger for gay kids, gay people out in the hinterlands. There's really not enough services for the gay elderly. There's nothing for kids, you know, in places like Kansas and Nebraska and Texas. That's where the work lies. We think we've come a long way because we're on TV, and well, I'm going to tell you something. If we don't maintain a sympathetic government entity in Washington, we could be snuffed out in 10 years, and believe me, we will be. All this infighting that we're doing, that's one of the things that destroyed GLF. There was a lot of squabbling, and it really did disintegrate into a lot of squabbling, broke up into a lot of small groups, which is fine because, you know, people have different interests. Some people wanted to concentrate on cultural issues, some people wanted to get more politically involved. They, you know, and that's good because we had a lot of members, and they really needed to split off into these different interest groups, let's say, and concentrate there. And a lot of, let's face it, a lot of laws got changed, a lot of books have been written. There's a lot that's been, I mean, in the universities you see all these professors that are of gender studies and all that stuff. That never existed 40 years ago. But it really, I think it's very tenuous. It's a really scary world out there. It's very violent. It doesn't take much to make people revert. To homophobia and the militarism that what happens when people become frightened. And believe me, gay women, gay men, trans people will be herded into the same cattle cars together. So stop fighting amongst each other. It's just all there is to it. Stop. Find a way to work together somehow, because, and I'm not just talking about Hollywood and TV. They seem to have no problem getting along. I'm talking about in the trenches. You know, when you start a gay youth center, you've got to include everybody, and you've got to listen to everybody's complaints. It's just the way it has to be. We are all very, very different. And to expect everyone to understand everything completely, too quickly, it's just not real. It's not human. It took 20 years for my family to completely digest the whole gay issue. And then on top of that, as soon as the 20 years was over, my mother had to confront the trans issue because my brother was going to trans. And she did it. They did it. Everybody evolved together. And so you got to give people a chance. You've got to find a way of communicating and get your message across. Myself, I don't have a, well, I guess that's about the only advice I can give you as, you know, well, young people who are trying to make a difference, or trying to move the agenda along. Well, the agenda needs to be spread into the hinterlands, into the places where, you know, internationally and South America, into the places where people are being murdered. Gay people are being murdered. Transgendered people are being murdered. I'm not too sure that my own sister wasn't actually murdered. She was certainly murdered by circumstances. And that just happened 3 years ago. She just couldn't take the abuse. And she let herself die. So, and she got helped along, believe me. So, that's my advice, and that's the end.